If you want to know how to play any note in any range of the flute with any dynamic that you choose, then you really need to know how to control your air properly. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 different components of air and how you can control them. Then I'll go through a few examples of how to apply these 3 components to the various ranges of the flute in different dynamic levels. So the first component of air that I'm going to walk you through is the simplest one, and that is the amount of air. So when we're thinking about dynamics on the flute, the amount of air really controls whether you're playing loudly or softly. The other elements that we will go through will control whether you have good pitch, whether you have good sound, and whether you have control. But to play loud or soft, it's really simply a matter of blowing more air or less air. So for example, in the low register, if I'm going to be playing an F quietly, I'm going to use just the tiniest amount of air. It takes it's just like I'm not even sure I would blow a seed off a dandelion with the amount of air I'm using because it's so little. If I want it to be louder, then I need to really blow all the seeds off that dandelion. So you can hear the difference between the quiet and loud, and it's really just a matter of more air. So then if you're playing, let's say in the high register and you want to play really loudly, then you're going to use a lot of air again. So we'll do another F. Okay, and then if you want to play quietly, again, as long as you have the control, and we'll go through all of those other elements in a minute, and then you can just use a teensy tiny bit of air. You probably can't even feel it this close to my face. So a little bit of air, quiet, tons of air, loud. So the second one I'm going to walk you through is the direction of the air. When we're playing the flute, we are aiming across the instrument. So some of the air goes in and some of it's just wasted and goes out. With our embouchure, we have a lot of flexibility in the way that we direct the air depending on the range or the pitch that we're trying to create. This can get really convoluted for people, so to keep it simple, I want to give you a little exercise to try. If you blow onto your hand, just using your flute embouchure like you would normally blow into your flute, it looks like this. Then without moving your chin up and down, without moving your head, without moving anything else in your body or your hand, just use your embouchure to aim the air up and down on your hand. So I'm able to get down to my wrist and sort of up to almost the tips of my fingers just using my lips. Now, why do we want to change the direction of the air? Well, it depends on what range you're playing and what pitch you're trying to control. So, for example, in the low register, we want to aim the direction of the air down lower into the flute. If I try to play a low D, let's say loudly, and I'm not aimed far enough down into the flute, so much air is getting wasted, the sound isn't centered, and it might even crack up the octave. So, whereas if I just aim it a little bit lower, it can come out nice and loud. So that's just the difference between kind of aiming here and aiming here. Now, with the high register, it's the same thing. If we're not aiming the air high enough, you can be blowing as loud as you want, it's not going to come out. Okay? Whereas if I aim it up, I can get it nice and loud. I can even aim it up even higher, and then it's too high. Okay, and then the air stops altogether because it's not going into the flute. So the other reason we want to manipulate the direction of the air is to control our intonation or our pitch. So often as we're getting quieter, you might have noticed that the pitch starts to droop. And that's for various reasons, but one of the ways that you can control that is by controlling the direction of the air more up as you get softer. So as I diminuendo, I think of the air slowly and steadily moving more across the flute instead of down. It looks like this. And then the other area that's simple to explain is if you're trying to play really loudly in the high register, often the pitch goes really sharp and you're a bit shrill. If you're playing in band, you probably hear this around you a lot with the flute players playing high and really, really sharp. So one of the things you can do is aim the air down with your lips. So instead of, that's a huge difference in the pitch just from aiming it down. One quick thing to note, some people recommend that you roll the flute in and out in order to change the direction of the air, and it will work. The problem that I have with that personally is that it gets rid of all the flexibility in my embouchure. So when I'm rolled in, it's a lot harder for me to do things like move forward and back or, aim the air with my lips more. And do big leaps and things like that. And then if you roll out, same thing. I just feel like I have less control. So for me, I like to keep the flute really neutral in the same place and 100% just use my lips to make those direction adjustments. If you're finding this video helpful, I'd encourage you to join our free school community, Fundamentally Flute. We have tons of tips and tricks all about dynamics and all sorts of other flute topics, and we'd love to have you join us. I'll make sure that the link is in the description. The third component I want to walk you through is the speed of the air. So we've been through the amount of the air and how to direct the air, but the speed of the air is really the most important thing that you want to control. So when we're talking about air support when playing the flute, which could be its own hour-long video, but what we're really trying to focus on is manipulating the speed of the air, okay? So if you picture a balloon and it's full of air and it has a tiny hole on the top and you're pushing on that balloon, okay? The harder that you push and the more pressure that you put on the balloon, the faster that air is going to shoot out. If you just lightly put pressure on, then it's going to come out a little slower. So the more that we pressurize the air by supporting it with our air support muscles, then the faster that the air goes. The other ways we can manipulate the speed of the air are through the shape in kind of our mouth and throat and with our embouchure. Okay, this is my favorite analogy about how things move through different shapes. Okay, so we have a tube of toothpaste. One end is very wide, okay? I'm gonna cut it off in a minute and you're gonna see. And one end is very tiny. So you have a tiny little hole here for the toothpaste. So if we squeeze it out the tiny hole, it comes out pretty fast, right? Then, if we cut off the big fat end, okay, the toothpaste comes out real slow in one giant disgusting blob. All right? So the same's gonna hold true for our air, okay? If everything in your mouth is really big and open and your embouchure is very wide, the air moves slower, okay? If everything is smaller, so you've got a small shape sort of inside your mouth, if this was the inside of your mouth, instead of it's kind of skinny, and then you have a very small, tiny embouchure, the air is gonna move a lot faster. So why does any of this matter when we're talking about dynamics? The speed of the air is really going to help you with your intonation and your control. And so when you're playing in the high register, for example, and you're trying to play really quietly, we talked about how the amount of air needs to be teeny tiny. But when you use just teeny tiny amount of air and it's not moving fast enough, then it doesn't come out. If I just support more, make a small shape in my mouth and in my embouchure, it's a teeny tiny amount of air, but it's moving super fast, okay? Conversely, sometimes when we're trying to play in the low register really loud, we're blowing really hard, we're aiming the direction down, but it's still not like happening. It's cracking up the octave or it sounds really like thin or kind of distorted. It's because the air is moving too fast because the air in the low register needs to move more slowly. And so if you open everything up, okay, you sort of use less pressure, so we're going to not support quite as much when we're trying to play loud in the low register. It's just kind of like a kind of feeling. Some people call it hot air, like if you were blowing onto a window, that big open kind of very slow air. That's going to help you play lots and lots of air. You can blow lots of air. It's just moving super slowly, and that's how you get it to be loud. So big embouchure, big shape in your mouth, not very much support, nice low down support. That's how you get it to not crack way up the octave. So in the end, it's going to be using the right combination of all three components: amount of air, direction of air, and speed of air, that's going to help you to be able to manipulate any note you want into any dynamic that you want. You'll be able to leap from a super high quiet note to a super loud low note because you know how much air, how to direct it, and what speed it needs to go for that top note. And then you know how to adjust the amount of air, the direction, and the speed that needs to slow down for that low note, and they'll come out for you. It sounds simple. It's not easy. It takes a lot of practice and trial and error. But if you can get all three together correctly, you can do any note in any dynamic in any range of the flute that you want. So the piece I'm using to highlight all the examples for you is the Hungarian Fantasy by Doppler. I chose it just because it does have a huge range on the flute as well as lots of different dynamics. So when I'm playing this first example, which is low notes that are kind of loud, what I'm trying to think about is lots of air. It's moving slowly because it's going through a big, huge, wide channel in my mouth and throat. I'm kind of supporting lower down, okay, and my embouchure will be bigger. And then I'm aiming the air down into the flute so that it doesn't crack up the octave and it isn't sounding kind of sharp or shrill, okay? So aiming about here. Inside my mouth is like very open, like a very big ah shape, and I'm fairly relaxed in my support muscles, okay? Okay, so that's an example of what I'm thinking about to play loudly in the low register. So next I'm going to play loudly in the high register. Things change a little bit. So yes, we're going to use lots and lots of air because it's loud, okay? The direction of the air, the thing is in the high register, it needs to be more across, but if we're too high, then the pitch goes up. So we're going to try and find kind of across, but maybe a little bit more down into the flute to keep the control of the pitch when you're blowing so much air through it, okay? And then the speed of the air, same thing, when you're playing loudly up there, the air needs to go fast because it's in the high register. But if the air moves too fast, again, the pitch is going to go up. It's going to be really thin and shrill. So what I do is I support a lot to get the air moving fast, but then I open everything in here to slow the air down enough to control the pitch. Okay, so I'm very strong in here. This gets tired pretty quick, but I'm super duper open in here. And I'm trying to aim a little bit down. I'd say probably about here. So now an example of something quiet in the low register would be the opening of the piece. It's pretty soft. Okay, because we're in the low register and we're playing softly, we want just a teeny, teeny, tiny amount of air, okay? The air needs to be down enough into the flute that the sound is coming out low, but not so down that the pitch droops and is flat. So this is one of those ones where we can compensate by bringing the direction up just a smidge, okay? And then same thing with the air. The air's got to be slow because we're in the low register, but if it's too slow, then again, the pitch really droops and sags and the sound is just kind of sad. So we want enough air speed to keep the pitch controlled, and we need the direction just up a little bit. So I'm aiming it more and more up as I go, and I'm lifting my support to keep the air speed moving fast as I diminuendo. So all the three different components are always kind of adjusting. When I get there, the air's direction is a little bit higher, and I'm supporting a little bit more because the note is higher, the speed needs to be faster as well. Hopefully you're starting to kind of understand how the components work together in the different ranges and the dynamics. So quietly in the high register, we're setting up for very, very fast air, but only a teeny amount of air. So just a small amount of air. It's moving super fast through a tiny embouchure, a small kind of E shape inside your mouth. Very lifted, strong support muscles. That's going to keep it moving fast. We're going to aim the air, as high as we can without the sound disappearing so that we keep that pitch moving the right direction and just like a little tiny bit of air. So just a tiny bit of air throughout, and just as I come down, just aiming just a little bit lower. Then there's crescendos and diminuendos. And so this is where you combine sort of all three components, and they're going to adjust throughout as you go. So I'm going to start in the low register really soft, then we do a crescendo up these runs and a diminuendo down. As I crescendo, I'm going to blow more air. I'm going to aim the direction of the air so that the notes are going up, and so the direction is going to go up, but not so far up that the pitch gets too sharp. Okay, so I'm going to control the direction of the air, and then the speed of the air, because I'm going up in the range, it's going to go faster, but again, I don't want the pitch to go sharp, so I'm going to make sure it's not too fast. So we're just kind of finding a medium direction and speed of air as I go through the crescendo. If I don't control the speed and the direction, this is what it sounds like. I'm blowing really loud, but it's very, very shrill and sharp. So I'm having to drop and kind of aim down so that it doesn't go sharp. One more time. Now it gets really, really loud in the high register, so I'm going to blow tons of air, but I want to make sure that it's not too high and it's not too fast. So I'm going to open everything up and I'm going to aim more down into the instrument. It's probably cutting out on the recording, but that's how I can get it to be really, really loud and open sound. Everything's just really open because I'm slowing down the air enough that it's not too sharp in the pitch, and I'm aiming it down enough that it's not going to go too sharp in pitch. So once you're able to control all of those three in all the different ranges and manipulate them, then you're really going to expand the flexibility of your dynamics and be able to play any note that you want in any range with any dynamic.